If you could think of the most worthless physical test or empty testing data that have zero to do with being a true difference maker, and then do a throwing session that is somewhat realistic, you'll have the NFL Combine and their quest to evaluate the next franchise QB. This is QB Unfiltered, my take. Quarterbacks and the NFL Combine are just a made-for-TV event.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up.
You know, I've said this more than once on this channel that the evaluation process with the NFL and quarterbacks is the most botched process every single year. And in this year's 2026 NFL draft, you are still going to have teams that miss out on QBs, either good or bad, because A, they don't know how to evaluate them. B, they have the wrong people making the evaluations. Or C, they continue to think that great testing numbers equal great quarterbacks. And before we jump into today's video, I'm going to give you two names, two quarterbacks that the NFL gurus screwed up on, and it was all because of the Combine. Anthony Richardson, first round selection, the number 4 pick, and Tom Brady, 6th round selection, pick number 199. All right, guys, like and share out this video. If you get something out of this, then please watch another one of my vids and subscribe to the channel QB Unfiltered. I greatly appreciate the support. Anthony Richardson and Tom Brady. Those two names and careers will tell you everything you need to know about how inaccurate the Combine is when it comes to QBs. Or to put it another way, it exposes how worthless the Combine is in evaluating quarterbacks. Or to put it a third way, it continues to expose how clueless front offices are by drafting quarterbacks just because they can run fast and jump high. With Richardson, his Combine testing numbers were off the charts. And you know, that would have carried a bunch of weight if he would have been playing a different position other than quarterback. But the testing that they put the QBs through has nothing to do with playing the position well. And Anthony Richardson's career up to this point proves that. Brady, on the other hand, went in round 6 for 2 reasons. The first one was his testing results weren't nearly good enough for the analytical slapdicks working the NFL's war rooms on draft day. And the second one, and probably the biggest reason why he went in round 6, was that picture of Brady standing there in just his gym shorts where he looked like, I don't know, a chemistry major at MIT. And as far as the thought process goes for those gurus in the front office making QB decisions, I'll guarantee you it went this way with Richardson and Brady. On one hand, you've got these guys going, there's no way in the world we can't draft this guy. The way he looks in just his shorts and those testing numbers he put up, we would be crazy not to draft him. And how could we possibly draft a guy, even though he was a starter for Michigan, he was just the MVP in the Orange Bowl? How can we draft that guy in one of the higher rounds after looking like he looked at the Combine? And just like that, Richardson went in round 1 and Brady went in round 6. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a closer look at the tests and the sessions that the QBs go through at the NFL Combine. In my opinion, these are the drills and the sessions that have zero factor in playing the position well. And a lot of these are under the category of absolutely ridiculous. Hand size. Yeah, that is measured with quarterbacks. It's talked about on social media. It's written about in NFL draft analysis. Hand size. You know, I just read something about that the other day that just cracked me up. They were talking about the average hand size for quarterbacks, and they said that the largest hands ever recorded for a quarterback at the Combine was Jim Druckenmiller. Jim Druckenmiller. And then they went on to list his career totals. He was out of the league quickly. Okay. Wingspan and arm length. quite possibly important statistical data for NBA players, not NFL quarterbacks. This one is pretty amazing to me. The voice command test. Okay. And the way that they list this, it's the ability of a QB to project with his voice, either in the huddle or at the line of scrimmage with his cadence. Amazing stuff. The world famous 40. Now, the 40 in regards to football is overrated for every and all positions on the field. Football players consistently executed plays in a game where they sprinted in a straight line for 40 yards unobstructed, then that may come into play, but that never happens. And the 40 in regards to quarterbacks, unimportant. The 3-cone drill, which measures agility. Again, like the 40, not necessary. The vertical jump and the broad jump. Okay, we're talking about explosion. One's going straight up, one's going out. Unnecessary skills and data for any quarterback. Okay, and speaking of worthless data in regards to QB evaluation, at this year's Senior Bowl practice, the scoreboard, the big jumbotron that they had for practices, had the QBs listed up there with the following data, which they called ball metrics. Longest air distance pass. Okay, which is a total waste of breath to talk about. All right, we'll discuss more about how far quarterbacks can throw the ball later on in this video. The second one that they listed and kept track of on the scoreboard was the fastest initial airspeed, and in parentheses, miles per hour. In other words, how fast is the ball traveling when they throw it? The Hall of Fame is littered with quarterbacks that probably would have had a hard time breaking eggshells with their throws. Drew Brees, Kenny Stabler, to name a few. And on the flip side of that, go back and take a look at Jay Schrader and his arm strength and the speed of his throws and his completion percentage, his accuracy and his efficiency. But my favorite has got to be the highest initial rotation. We're talking about RPMs on the ball. How many revolutions the ball has while it's in the air. In other words, throwing a tight spiral. That's amazing stuff. When you're throwing the ball as a quarterback, spirals are the preferred way, right? Tight spirals are preferred, but it's not a must. And again, the Hall of Fame has a bunch of QBs in there that consistently did not throw tight spirals. And that shit right there that I just talked about, that was what got Major League Baseball in trouble a few years ago. They started running with these stupid and irrelevant analytics instead of just playing good baseball. And it looks like football is headed in the same direction. Let's move on to this next category now. These are tests and drills that are somewhat a factor with the QB position at the combine. The passing drills, okay? And I'm going to say that with an asterisk, the passing drills to an extent. And again, more on that later. Then we've got the mental and cognitive assessment tests. Again, to an extent. They used to do this thing called the Wonderlic test. The Wonderlic is kind of being pushed aside for this new age stuff. And one of the biggest ones now that a lot of NFL teams are doing is what's called the S2 cognitive assessment. And, if you go back and you pull up the data on what this is measuring in terms of actual practical mental and cognitive assessment of a quarterback, you can go back and look at their game film and get everything that this test supposedly measures. Now, the problem I have with these new age tests like the S2 is if you've got quarterbacks that are sitting down at a computer screen and they're doing reactionary tests, reactionary drills. Well, the one thing that's taking out of the equation is no pass rush, no fluid environment, no chaotic environment. You don't have 5 offensive linemen that are in and around you, flashing in front of your face, quickly blurring your vision. You don't have the explosions and the banging and the collisions, violent collisions that are going around you as you're in the pocket trying to deliver the ball on time and make the right decisions, right? So you're taking the actual practical experience of being able to make quick and accurate decisions, and you're really sterilizing it. And that's not the way to go. So I go back to what I said. When you put on game film and you watch a quarterback in a game, not as highlight film, that's the best way to evaluate the dude's reaction time, how he analyzes stuff, and whether or not he's a great decision maker. Okay, and then finally, the tests and sessions that they have at the combine that I think are extremely important in evaluating QBs. The first one is the medical exams and the physicals, for obvious reasons, and we'll leave it at that. The second one is the whiteboard sessions, and these aren't publicized. They're not filmed. Nobody knows what goes on there. They're behind closed doors. I think that this is the number one test or session that they put quarterbacks through at the combine is the whiteboard. Now, let's talk about that. What happens in these whiteboard sessions? Well, you've got quarterbacks that get up on the board, the grease board or the whiteboard, where they have to draw up routes, and they have to talk about read progressions on the routes. They have to draw up defensive fronts and coverages. They've got to draw up and explain the different pass protection schemes. They've got to draw up and explain blitz protections. They have to recall information provided in the mock playbooks they get from each individual team. Okay, where they're given a playbook, a condensed down playbook of what they're going to be running if that team does draft them. They have to study that material. They have to know it. And then they go into these whiteboard sessions, and then they have to teach it back to the NFL coaches that are in the room. Okay, and then all of this stuff that they do on the whiteboard helps these teams determine football IQ and the ability to grasp new situations, okay, those mock playbooks that are thrown at them, for example. Now, I don't know if they do this. I doubt that they do, but if I were running one of these sessions as an offensive coordinator or a quarterback coach, I would do this. I would sit the individual quarterback down, potential quarterback, and I would put game film on of one of the games that we played this past season. And I would take a particular pass play, a pass concept. I would explain it in real general terms. Then I'd let the play run, rewind it, let the play run, rewind it. And then I'd ask the potential quarterback, okay, can you tell me, in your opinion, what you would have done different on this play if you were taking snaps for us? Or what did you like and what didn't you like with what our guy did on this play? And again, that's to get the feel for this guy's football IQ, his understanding of the pass concepts and the read progressions. It's also giving you some pretty good background on his mechanics, because I'm expecting one of these young QBs in here. If I've got a quarterback that's executing something sloppy with his feet, or sloppy, undisciplined with his eyes, I would expect that guy to bring that up. And if he does do that, that's high in my book. That's what I'm looking for. Again, I don't think NFL teams do this with guys in those whiteboard sessions, but I think it's a pretty good idea. Okay, now the other thing with the whiteboard is the grading detail, or the detail in general. Now, this may sound a little picky to some of you and a little obsessive, but I think it says a lot about what's going on upstairs with these QBs. So when you're drawing up these plays, how do you draw up the formations? This is a big one with me, and this is just me personally. Do you designate who the center is by either putting an X through him as opposed to the other 4 circles that you have as offensive linemen? Or do you use circles for the other offensive linemen and you make the center a square? Do you designate the center? Do you put 11 dudes up there in the offensive formation? And more importantly, do you put 11 defensive guys? That is an interviewing nightmare that I've gone through personally in my career when I was interviewing defensive coordinators. Attention to detail with the formation, again, obsessive, but tells me something. Are all the circles the same size? Are the lines and the arrows on the routes neat? Is your handwriting neat and organized? Here's a big one. Capping grease pens. You wouldn't believe how many grease pens are wasted because they dry out, because you got a dude that either writes something up on the board and then he goes into a pontification. And while he's talking, he's got the cap in one hand and the exposed grease pen in the other hand. And he's talking and yakking and pontificating, and that grease pen is drying out. Okay. Or you got the guy that does what he's supposed to do, and at the end of his session, he slams that cap on the grease pen. He puts it on cockeyed and it dries out overnight. And now you just lost a grease pen. That's a big deal. Says a lot. Okay. At the end of the day now, what makes this, in my opinion, so valuable, these whiteboard sessions, this is the highest pressure job interview that these guys are ever going to do. Not only do you have to show that you've got a great football IQ, you have to project yourself in an extremely confident manner, but you also have to be respectful, well-spoken. You got to have a sense of humor. You got to look people in the eye. You got to have a firm handshake. You are selling yourself. This is a valuable session. This is the most valuable session I think QBs do at the combine. And with that list that I just went over, okay, isn't it absolutely crazy that in 2000 at the combine, you had these whiteboard closed door sessions and you didn't have one NFL team that sat Tom Brady down and could see his football IQ, and maybe more important than that, know and understand and feel the competitiveness that he had within him. But he ran a 4.2 plus 40 and he looked like a 55-year-old flag football quarterback with just his shorts on, and you can't draft a guy like that. Okay, so let's end it here talking about the throwing session at the combine. First, as I said earlier, I wouldn't throw at the combine if I was a QB under any circumstances unless I was trying to significantly change the perception about me based on my career that I just finished, or if I was a long shot and I was trying to get my foot in the door for a late round selection. Any other situation, I wouldn't do it. And the reason why I wouldn't do it is because you're throwing to receivers that aren't your dudes. Okay. You're throwing to the receivers who are there at the combine that play for other teams. And when you do that, you don't know their strengths. You don't know their weaknesses. Most importantly, you don't know each individual receiver's speed and how they run each individual route. And that affects completion percentage. And that's why you see, in my opinion, a lot of times quarterbacks holding the ball too late, because they're trying to process in their brain exactly how fast the guy's coming out of cuts and how he's running certain routes. Well, that affects them individually, the QB. So at the pro day, when they're throwing to their guys that they've worked with for 4 or 5 years, or if they're a transfer portal guy, at least a year or two, just went through an entire season practicing every day and competing in games, they know what each one of those guys can do running routes. And it just makes their performance that much better and more confident. Okay, secondly, throwing at the combine. As the great Kurt Warner tweeted after the combine, quote, "When you watch QBs throw at the combine, watch how and when they throw each throw, not if the ball is complete or not." And that goes not only for the fans watching at home, but specifically talking to the personnel and the front office gurus for each NFL team. And if you go back and you pull up any of the noise that was on social media after the combine, or you read anything that was written about the throwing session at the combine, you're going to hear continuously or read continuously about so-and-so missed only one pass throwing, or so-and-so was perfect throwing the ball, no incompletions, or so-and-so struggled with his accuracy and completion percentage. And what Warner is saying is evaluate the mechanics when the ball gets out of the QB's hand and where the ball placement is. And I've got two real quick examples of why I think that the throwing session is somewhat unrealistic and just a TV event. And I'm going to talk about two dudes. The first guy is Josh Allen in the 2018 Combine. So I was going to watch this Combine with the QBs throwing because I wanted to see if Allen was going to do this, and he didn't disappoint. So they're throwing, they're throwing their routes. They're quick game. They start mixing in some intermediate throws, and now here come the verticals, and here it comes. He did exactly what I knew he was going to do. He was going to show off how far he could throw the ball in the air. So they snap it. His receiver takes off on the vertical. Josh Allen takes a 5-step drop and doesn't hit step 5 and cut it loose. He hits step 5 and hitches up, and then hitches up, and then hitches up and cuts it loose. Every time you take a hitch step as a quarterback throwing a vertical ball, you can add about 10 yards that ball has to be in the air longer. And he's hitching up to let that receiver get further downfield, and he cuts it loose and he throws it 70 plus yards. You know how unrealistic that is? You're showing off your arm strength, but if you can show me a game where a quarterback threw the ball on a vertical 70 plus yards in the air, that's a rare occurrence. And the reason why you don't see that is because when the ball's in the air for 70 yards, it allows more DBs to get in on the play, like safeties. And so that's just an unrealistic deal where a guy's just showing off his arm strength. It really doesn't come into play in a game situation. Okay, the second example was the following year, 2019. Gardner Minshew had just got done playing for the Washington State Cougs, and he was playing for Mike Leach in the air raid. I specifically wanted to watch him in this throwing session because I wanted to check his footwork out and how fast the ball was coming out of his hand, which is a requirement in the air raid. And sure enough, Minshew didn't disappoint, where the other quarterbacks in that combine had sloppy feet, slow feet. His were crisp and quick, and that ball was coming out on time, which you've got to do throwing the ball. Okay. Now, one of the throws in this 2019 Combine that just really spoke volumes, and it included the great Michael Irvin on commentary. I don't know who the quarterback was, but they were throwing slant routes, and this QB takes a 3-step drop and throws an absolute seed on this slant route. I mean, there's smoke coming off the back of that ball. It hits the receiver right in the middle of the chest. Perfect throw. The head announcer, I don't remember who that was, said something like, "Holy cow, what arm strength, what a great throw, yada, yada, yada." Michael Irvin steps in and goes, "Yeah, except his receiver is going to be in the hospital overnight because the ball was thrown way too late, and the safety coming downhill just blew that receiver up." And there was silence. There was air silence. He stunned his co-anchor there, but he was absolutely right. So again, you got guys in these throwing drills that it's not realistic. Okay, so in my opinion, the very best way to evaluate quarterbacks for the NFL draft is this. Break down game film. That tells you everything you need to know in terms of football IQ, mechanics, anticipation, ball placement, and most importantly, decision making. Then do your physical and your medical exams, and do your closed door interviews and whiteboard session, which really allows you to drill down on a QB's football IQ. And you got to watch them throw in person. Okay. Watching a quarterback throw on film tells you tons and tons, but you got to watch them throw in person also, because there are certain things that you can pick up watching a QB throw with your eyes in person that you can't see or can't tell on film. So you got to watch them throw in person. That's why when quarterbacks throw at their pro days, that's why that is a big deal and a smart decision for them. Okay, so at the end of the day, guys, with quarterbacks, it is this. First and foremost, great decision maker, mechanics, pocket management, anticipation on throws, ball placement on throws, competitiveness, clutch player, and a leader. It's not speed. and it's not jumping, and it's not your freaking hand size. Okay, guys, let me know what you think. Did I get it right or did I get it wrong? This is QB Unfiltered, and remember, always throw the ball short to guys who can score. See ya.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.